Welcome. My name is Beth Johnson. I'm co-organizer of the Stillwater Gazette Candidate Forum Series. I join co-organizer Margot Reinberger in welcoming you to the Washington County Sheriff Q&A session. Up until the City Council Forum, where a candidate notified us only hours before the forum that he would be unable to attend, over the past 25 years, we have always utilized a forum-type format where candidates running for the same office address the same questions at the same time. And unfortunately, Dan Starry also is unable to attend this evening for this particular style of forum. When we realized after repeated attempts that we were not going to be able to get the two Washington County sheriffs, Paul Hoppe and appointed incumbent Dan Starry together, we still wanted to give voters the opportunity to see and hear both. At that point, we decided to do separate Q&A sessions, but we will not utilize the same questions. As advertised in several newspapers, all questions asked of the candidate Hoppe will be from the Stillwater Gazette and from Margot. For those of you here in the audience, please turn off your cell phones and please show respect and do not talk while the Q&A is in session. Thank you, and I will now turn over to Margot Reinberger.
Thanks, Beth. As Beth said, Paul Hoppe is running for Washington County Sheriff. Thank you very much for joining me. Please tell us about your background, Paul.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us, or having me. I was really looking forward to doing a forum with Dan. Unfortunately, we couldn't work out the details. I am available on the 22nd, too. If we can work that out, that would be great. But outside of that, I appreciate the Gazette inviting me to the Q&A. I am currently the police chief and public safety director for the city of Wyoming, and I have been for the last almost 10 years. I was originally hired out of Oak Park Heights about a little over 9 years ago to take over the Wyoming Police Department after they had gone through 3 chiefs in about 5 years. And my job was to really transform that police department into one of the most community-engaged police departments and professional police departments in Minnesota, and have successfully done that. I've been awarded by the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association the Excellence in Innovation Award last year, which is not an award they give out every year. They give them out occasionally to professional police chiefs in Minnesota when they implement new programs that have a very positive effect not only in our departments but our profession as a whole in Minnesota. And the program that we implemented actually had a national effect on how law enforcement engages our community on social media and the humanization of law enforcement to make ourselves approachable and build virtual inclusive communities. I was born in the south part of the county, and I was raised through my teenage years in Afton-Lakeland area. I graduated in 1987 from the Stillwater High School, so go Ponies, all right? I was a football player back in the day, so I always have to give a shout out to our Ponies. And from there, I spent the first 20 years of my career working for Washington County and Oak Park Heights Police Department, neighboring right here to Stillwater. So I'm not unfamiliar with the Stillwater area at all. Every night that we're regular partners and we'd share calls and spend a lot of time in both cities here. And then when I was hired in Wyoming, it was to advance the career and an opportunity to really demonstrate my leadership style. My educational background is I have an associate's degree in law enforcement, a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, a certificate from Virginia University out in Washington, D.C., graduated from the FBI National Academy, Quantico, Virginia, and I have a master's degree in police administration from St. Thomas University. So not only do I have more experience than my opponent in actually running an organization and being the top guy, but I have more education. And I think that's really what qualifies me for this job is the diverse experience and education. Not only am I the police chief, but I also run the fire department for the city of Wyoming. When I originally started with the police department, our goal was to really transform that. And no good deed goes unawarded. So at the completion of that, they did award me by handing me the fire department and asking me also to transform that department. And so we operate under the public safety model, where I manage both emergency management, fire, and police department, which really gives a very diverse background in public safety. For the last almost 10 years, I've also been on the board of directors for the Youth Service Bureau and focus a lot on the youth in our communities and diversionary programs to reduce youth recidivism in our communities and keep those individuals out of that pipeline, the criminal justice pipeline, so that we give them, a reasonable opportunity to succeed in life. And so I come, to Washington County and run for this race because this is my county, this is my community. I've spent my lifetime, almost my entire life, growing up and raising my kids in Washington County. And when I look at the sheriff's race, and we haven't had a sheriff's race in 12 years, this race is really important because it's going to set the direction of the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement in Washington County for the next decade. And it's really about the future of Washington County Sheriff's Department and how our guardianship as law enforcement is applied to our communities. And I think it requires the right individual with diverse public safety experience that's really demonstrated leadership skill and how to get individuals working together collaboratively as a team, as a group, to accomplish some amazing goals. And we've been able to demonstrate that in the city of Wyoming. But I want to bring that same policing philosophy, the guardianship policing philosophy, to my community. And I want to pay it forward to the community that helped raise me and make me who I am today. So I want to pay it forward to Washington County and use those skills and those experiences to serve it back to my own community so that my kids have the same opportunities to raise their kids as I did myself here in the county.
Thank you. Two things for those who might not know. Wyoming is just north of Forest Lake.
Correct.
People don't know that. Yep. And the other thing is that, do you hold two positions or one position with two names? I don't get that.
Sometimes I don't get it either. It's one position, but two titles, because every law enforcement agency has to identify a CLEO, a chief law enforcement officer known as the police chief. As a public safety director, I am also the police chief. So I actually hold one position, which is overseeing, technically two positions with one title that's hashed with police chief and public safety director so that it qualifies for the CLEO position within the agency. So it's like two jobs.
Mm-hmm. Let's address a big problem in Washington County, the opioid epidemic. Okay. How would you confront this if elected sheriff?
The opioid overdose epidemic is affecting every one of our communities. It affects every one of our neighborhoods, and I guess if you were to really ask within your family, you would probably find that it affects most families in some capacity. The opioid epidemic really started about 10 years ago when we started to realize that people were migrating away from what we would traditionally think as drugs, cocaine, heroin, and stuff like that, and they were using prescription medication to get their high. And they were abusing those prescription medications, the opioids, and because of that, we were starting to see an increase in deaths within our neighborhoods and within our families as a result of the addictions to opioids, because they're very addictive. Most of us know them as painkillers, and they're in every one of our medicine cabinets at home. And so what we started to discover was that a lot of the opioids were being introduced into our families and our neighborhoods by basically self-prescribing them, unaware that we were doing it. That when we had members of our families, that had aches and pains, a lot of times, we as individuals were offering up our unused medication to them to help them, with their pain control. Unprescribed from a doctor. It was prescribed to us, but we allowed, our family, our friends to use them. And so we started to realize that, this is a problem because we're seeing a lot of overdoses because of it. And so we had to get creative on how we have to get creative on how we really look at this. And it's more than just a war on drugs. It's really a three-prong approach. That we need to get aggressive and hold those individuals that are shipping and importing the illegal opioids, the black market opioids, into our communities. And we recently worked a case, a very complex case. And we had some teenagers that were purchasing it through the dark web with cryptocurrency and shipping it by the United States Postal Service right into our community and distributing it to our youth. Which kind of lends to, one of the next questions we may talk about shortly is how digital technology is affecting our crime. And so we have to go after these individuals aggressively, and we did this. And we held them accountable and got convictions on these too. But we're also seeing the introduction of opioids into those with addictive behaviors from our own medicine cabinets. Whether we self-prescribe them, whether we give them to them, or whether they take them unannounced out of our medicine cabinets. And so the drug take-back program has been recently introduced and is very effective in trying to get our unused opioids out of our homes so that those with addictions can't get access to them. And the third part we need to look at is how do we treat those with addictive qualities? Because if we can control the addictive qualities of humans, we can really eliminate the use of any kind of narcotics. So one of the things that I'm going to be looking at if elected as your sheriff is partnering basically the addiction issue and how do we get people treatment that can't afford it with our civil forfeiture processes, which you hear a little bit about in the news. And that's when we take the assets and dollars from our drug dealers and we seize them. Why not couple that with a addiction proactive program, education program, that allows those that don't have the financial resources to apply for a scholarship through that civil forfeiture process fund so that we can get them into the necessary treatment facilities to help reduce the addiction issues. And so we really want to look at it from not only aggressive enforcement of those that are bringing them into our neighborhoods and importing them into our neighborhoods, but we also want to look at is there a way that we can help those with addictive qualities get off of the addiction and reduce the demand for the drugs.
Okay, I thought there might be a fourth prong, and maybe it's not valuable anymore, education.
Education, that is the fourth prong.
But is it too much education, much like cigarettes? Okay, we all know that it causes cancer, that kids continue. Actually, a lot of people continue to smoke.
No, education is the fourth prong to it, so thank you for correcting me on that, for sure. The education is the fourth prong to really reducing the use of narcotics as a whole. Doesn't mean if it's just opioids, but all of it. And some of what we want to do is get at those individuals that, that are elderly who a lot of times will have a lot of these opioids in their cabinets and educate them that, hey, it's good to get rid of these. And how about if we bring our drug take-back programs right to the elderly care facilities rather than waiting for them to come to us, and let's get them out of their cabinets right away and educate them on what the proactive part of that is. Educate them on we don't want to self-prescribe. How do we get that out of there? We also want to continue to reach out to our youth, and so that they understand how dangerous some of these drugs are. When we start talking about carfentanil, and it's an elephant tranquilizer, and we start looking at fentanyl and how it's significantly more potent than morphine, and we start looking at and educating our kids as the danger of these drugs and how little bit it takes to actually put you into respiratory arrest. Mm-hmm. And so that's a significant part of it also, is the education of our youth and our families as to what the consequences could be.
Thank you. I got another hot topic on this. Okay. What additional improvements, if any, can be done in terms of investigating, arresting, and punishing those involved in human and sex trafficking? So, human and sex trafficking is really kind of one of those hot issues right now. And one of the things that we're discovering is that since Craigslist and Backpages have gone offline, it's been a lot more difficult to find those individuals that are engaging in human trafficking and sex trafficking. And so when we talk about technology and how technology plays into the crime world, all that has gone to the dark web. It's gone to a platform that we're not really that familiar with. But we have to be more educated on as law enforcement, and we really have to be more trained on how the dark web works and how the black market works and how do we effectively get in there and find these individuals, because every time that we find an avenue in where they're doing business, they move because they figured out that we're there.
And so as we talk about, sex trafficking, human trafficking, we need to stay up on technology so that we can continue to migrate with them and evolve with that whole industry as it goes dark on us, so that we can find these individuals and prosecute them and be aggressive about it.
Now, you've mentioned technology in both questions.
Right.
Why don't you address more what you envision? What have you done?
So
Shows progress that's helped your community.
Correct. We are, in Wyoming, I've taken technology from an engagement part to a whole different level. About 4 or 5 years ago, I really started to recognize that we have a virtual community out there with our younger generation. And how do we engage that younger generation when they're online and we're still trying to operate as an institution in the old ways of engaging our communities? And so we launched a social media initiative about 4 or 5 years ago in Wyoming that at first maybe took some criticism because it was new and it was different and it was innovative and people didn't completely understand it. But we were in one of the most turbulent times in law enforcement in the 28 years that I've been policing. And we had to do something different. We had to evolve. And so we launched a social media initiative that really humanized law enforcement and really engaged our community, to the point where we are the most followed police department in Minnesota on social media. That our community every day reaches out to our officers and thanks them not only for what they do, but for being on that platform. And what I find from a police chief's perspective that I like the most about it is that our people are approachable. That our law enforcement officers and the agency that I run are approachable because of the work that we did in looking at where our younger generation is, where their community exists, and building that virtual community so that we can engage our community better, that we can communicate them more effectively. And because of those reasons, that we're actually better at solving crimes because we have this huge following on social media, that we put our evidence, or when we're trying to find somebody or identify a suspect, a lot of times we put it out there on social media and ask the community for the help. And the community responds back and helps us solve those crimes.
So is the community your partner in crime, kind of?
The community is our partner in crime. We are so successful at it, and we have such a great following that we have other agencies across the state of Minnesota that when they're looking for individuals or they're trying to solve a crime, they actually reach out to our department in Wyoming and ask us to put their crime information up to help them solve a crime because our network is so large.
Give me examples of how the community has been involved with this. This is fascinating to me.
So I can give you 2 really good examples. We had an ice house stolen from someone's driveway in town, an ice castle. If you're in California, you probably don't know what that is, but in Minnesota, we all know what an ice castle is. And we had some individuals that decided they wanted it more than the homeowner, and they hooked up to it and pulled it out of the driveway. The only problem is they cut the corners short and they got stuck. So the neighbor across the street, his dad was visiting from Arizona and was kind enough to get the tractor and hook up and to the pickup truck and pull the truck and trailer out for the guys and get them on their way.
Airhead.
But you just can't make this stuff up sometimes,
Right.
Margot.
Oh, my goodness.
We posted it on social media, and WCCO picked up the story because it was getting shared so many times and had such great following on social media that WCCO picked it up, and they did a story on it. 20 minutes after it aired, we got a call from somebody in South St. Paul saying that stolen ice house is in my neighbor's driveway. And the credit really goes to our network of people that shared it. And WCCO, and we're always good about thanking that community and the news outlets for working with us. But I always tell people that story worked. If it was a pickup truck, probably not quite so much. But because it was an ice castle in Minnesota, it was like picking a fight with a cult.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, everybody is passionate about that one.
Right.
We recently had a credit card fraud case, that took place in Wyoming where they basically came in and used fraudulent credit cards. And they hit our community for, $5,000 or $6,000 in one night. But we didn't know who they were. We had pictures of them, but we didn't know who they were. So we put them out on the pictures on our traditional law enforcement network, and none of the other law enforcement agencies knew who they were. So we posted their pictures on social media. And it took about 2 days for those pictures to migrate into the suspect's network of people on social media. And then our phone rang off the hook with what their names were, where they lived, and the crime network that they were involved in that led all the way back to Chicago.
So there's kind of an excitement probably in your community, you know, that they're
Our
helping.
community is very invested in us, in helping us solve crimes. And when we talk about community policing, that's really what it's about. It's about getting the community involved and helping us police the community. So it's a guardianship mentality, that we're working in partnership with our communities to help keep our communities safe.
Moving on to another topic, how can the Sheriff's Office provide leadership in school security and safety precautions? I mean, that has been in the news a lot.
School safety is one of my primary initiatives, and if you follow us on Facebook, which I suggest you all do, at hoppeforsheriff.com on our website, or at Hoppe for Sheriff on Facebook, I just put out a couple of videos on school safety, and kind of looking at the future of where school safety may need to go. And it's going to require a partnership between the students and the families, law enforcement, the schools, and the mental health community. And I put two videos out. One is about an app called See Something or Send Something, because every day our younger generations is having thousands of conversations around us in silence and we never hear a word. We all know what we're talking about, text messaging and everything else. And a lot of times they see information that might be of concern to the school and to the families and to the safety of our schools. And if we can get those kids to share that information with us early, then we can send that information to a risk assessment team who will look at it from a school perspective, law enforcement, and mental health to really direct that individual or those at-risk kids to the necessary resources and appropriate resources, because it isn't always law enforcement, and it may not be the school. But to direct those at-risk individuals early so we can intervene before we have a catastrophic event. But in the event that that worst day does happen, there's other technology out there that I think we can implement in partnership with the schools and private industry that really help our first responders receive early, accurate information so that when we do respond to that worst day, that we get our resources on target quickly and we rethink about how we protect those kids and how we communicate and how we maybe evacuate rather than shelter in place.
You know, obviously, a lot of the topics you're covering could be full-hour topics, I'm sure.
I think each one of those could be a full hour, but when we do look at, you know, the safety of our kids and the safety of our schools, it's going to require that we continue to evolve, and we continue to look for new and innovative ideas and initiatives on how to really combat it, control it, and prevent it.
Washington County is rapidly becoming more diverse, for sure, in race, religion, economic class. How do you plan to be the sheriff for all residents?
The one thing that I really love about this position is that it's the only local law enforcement position that's elected by the people. And you're elected by the people to serve the people. You're not appointed like a police chief. Your job isn't to serve the institution or the establishment. Your job is to represent the people and all people. And with Washington County growing as quickly as it is and the diversity coming as quick as it is, you have to really be educated in all of the different religions. And that's not just me, but our staff. You have to understand how some of the different demographics and the religions play into how people perceive law enforcement, how they perceive community, and help each other understand the differences and appreciate the differences of the different diverse groups within our community so that we build inclusive communities. We don't want to have segregated communities. We don't want to have them in silos. We don't want to polarize them. And a lot of that's going to start by really reaching out to all of those different diverse groups and starting those dialogues with those diverse groups. But also when we look at our staff and how our staff represents those diverse groups, we have to really start recruiting initiatives that brings those levels of diversity within the organization. Because each population, diverse population with our community, wants to be represented by people who understand and appreciate what their perspective on life is. And when we bring the diversity into our community or into our police departments or our sheriff's department, we actually have an opportunity for our staff to learn from those individuals so that we start to have different perceptions, not based on textbooks, but perceptions based on personal experience engaging with people of different diversities. And so there's a significant part of that happens in the education process and informing our staffs and sensitizing our workforce to a changing culture within our community or in our county. That's very important. But on the community side, the community wants to be managed, it wants to be policed, it wants a guardian that understands what it was like to grow up as those individuals, what it was like to grow up in a different ethnic background, so that when we go to handle those domestics, we understand better what that individual or those families experience, and we can come with better solutions during those things because they see life differently, because they've had different personal experiences. One of the things I love most about the diversity that we have in Wyoming is that I have a volunteer police reserve that's from Bosnia. He's a refugee from Bosnia. And we learned so much from him as an organization that when he starts to tell his story, what it was like to grow up in a war-torn country and how different it is when he lives here in America, we really appreciate that some of the individuals that live in our communities have come from these war-torn countries as refugees and resettled within our communities, and how devastating their experiences were in life, and how they may perceive law enforcement differently because of those personal experiences, and how do we break down those barriers. So that is a huge challenge as Washington County continues to change in diversity, that we evolve as an organization with them.
We just addressed the engaging with diversity. How about engaging people with mental health issues?
You know, one of the things I'm really proud of is that the initiative Stomp Out Suicide actually started in Wyoming several years ago after the death of a teenage girl. And that family reached out to the fire department in Wyoming and said, we want to start this initiative to bring awareness to suicide prevention and mental health. And our organization stepped up to the challenge. And we started this initiative with this family, and this family grew the suicide awareness to such a great level that it's actually been taken over by Canvas Health. And last year, during our annual suicide prevention run, they raised almost $90,000 in one day. But that's how we partner with that mental health community, and seeing that, you know, mental health is a significant challenge for law enforcement. And what we need to do is continue to train our employees to be compassionate and understanding with those that are in crisis, so that when we're dealing with them, that we don't jump to conclusions or that we don't misinterpret the signals that we're seeing and our outcomes are negative. Rather, we want to be well informed so that we can deal with individuals in mental health crisis with compassion and understanding, caring. But there's another component I think that we need to work on in law enforcement, and that is the partnership with our health and human services. That usually when those events happen with law enforcement, it's a cry out for help. And we are there to deal with them during that incident and to manage that and hopefully get a positive outcome from that incident. But the mental health crisis doesn't go away. And so we need to be able to work more closely with our health and human services so that we have those follow-up contacts with those individuals, that we start looking for long-term solutions and long-term care options for those people suffering from mental health. It can't just be law enforcement responds, deals with the issue, and then goes away and the information goes nowhere. That's a cry for help. And that's where we need to take that information, work with our health and human services so that we start to build healthier communities.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay. We'll be here for a couple hours.
No, I like your, 45 minutes as promised. I said a half hour, but 45 minutes, it's certainly worthy of it. Okay. Are there any misconceptions about the sheriff's office that you think need to be addressed? What you would do, who's involved, how they work with the county, anything?
You know, the county is a very important part of providing overall law enforcement services. So we have a number of communities within Washington County, Stillwater being one of them, Oak Park Heights, Bayport, Woodbury, Cottage Grove. And they have their primary service providers in each one of those communities. And the Sheriff's Department even though you may perceive it as doesn't really provide services to me, it really does. It provides the 911 system that you call in the event of emergency. It's not your local provider that answers that, it's Washington County Sheriff's Office. It provides the jail services that when your officers are making arrests on the street in those other departments, they bring those inmates to the Sheriff's Department to provide that detention facility. It also provides and supports a lot of the special services that are shared throughout the county, whether it be the K-9 unit, whether it be the narcotics unit, whether it be the SWAT team, and so the special investigations units, the sex trafficking task force. And the Sheriff's Department manages a lot of those specialty things because at the end of the day, regardless of who your department is, it can't afford to provide all of the required services needed to keep your community safe. That there are times when we have significant events that require additional services, and so we look for opportunities to collaborate and share those services. And Washington County is the primary agency that really works on the collaboration of services with all departments and all communities, because it's the one agency that touches all of those different police departments. So as much as you may not think that the Sheriff Department has much of an impact on your policing services if you have your own police department, the reality is it does. It has a significant impact. And that's why this position is so important and about collaborating with all of these different partners and about serving the Washington County residents as a whole.
Talking about this position, okay, I served as a ballot judge in Stillwater back in August. That means I have to tell them exactly don't cross over a zillion times. But the one question they asked, actually was the only question, it was asked multiple times, where is the sheriff's race on my ballot? I mean, they were ticked off, okay?
Turn the page over.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I mean, normally it's like, where do I get a new pen? That was like the most excitement I usually have in the past, but this was like extremely interested in the sheriff's race. Why do you think that is this year?
There hasn't been a sheriff race in 12 years in this county. Bill Hutton was the last elected a sheriff 12 years ago. There hasn't been a contested race in 12 years. This year, the community has the choice. The community has the choice as to who will represent their voice and how our guardianship applies this year. And that's why you're seeing so many signs across Washington County, because it's not a choice that the community really has very often, and so it's an important choice. It really sets the tempo of, do we operate as warriors? That we're external entities that come in and enforce laws within your community because we feel as though our authority is inherent to us, and then we're going to impose our authority upon you as a warrior would as an external force? Or are we going to operate as guardianships? Under the guardianship mentality is you're a vibrant part of that community, and the community grants the authority to us to be used to police our community. And that's what I'm talking about as far as my leadership. And what I do already for the last 10 years and how I lead our police department and apply our authority to our communities, it's granted to us by our community. And so in this election, the choice as to who should lead that organization is really the community's choice. It's not the establishment's choice. The sheriff shouldn't be appointed. It should be elected by the people to represent the people. And that's what I'm really excited about this race for. And I think a lot of people in Washington County are excited about it. Because I think a lot of people in Washington County think that, like I do, that we can do better on how we police our communities. I think a lot of people in Washington County think like I do, that we have to evolve the organization and prepare it to take on the challenges that are coming in the future. And I think a lot of people think like I do, that it's going to take a very educated, diverse, and experienced individual that's had the opportunity to work at a couple of organizations and see how it's done differently in different organizations, so that we pull the best from all of those different experiences and apply it to our leadership, so that we can move the organization forward and evolve it with our community. Because our communities here in Washington County are exploding. They are growing at a rapid rate. And with that also comes new challenges in law enforcement. And it's going to take an innovative leader to move the organization forward. to get the individuals, the employees, and there are some outstanding employees in Washington County. But we need to get them working together as a group. We need to get cohesiveness within the organization. Regardless of what your external goals are, until we can get our employees working together as one cohesive unit with a clear vision and a clear mission as to where we're going, you won't accomplish the external goals.
As Sheriff, would you view Washington County uniformly, or are there different issues in different parts of the county?
The one thing unique, I think, because the county is so long, I mean, my wife, when we're out campaigning, she's very good about saying, are we seriously still in Washington County after we've been driving an hour? Because we live on the north end, and so when we go to Cottage Grove, it's quite the trek. But yeah, there is different pockets within Washington County. If you start to look at Woodbury and Oakdale and Cottage Grove, you know, and they're really being consumed by, you know, that second tier suburb. And they're really becoming a suburban communities. And then you compare them to Scandia, Stillwater Township, May, Denmark, where they're still very rural communities. The policing dynamics are different. And so as we, as an organization, as Washington County as an organization, has to try and police, you know, Hugo differently than it does Stillwater Township, you really have to sit down and strategically plan with those councils and really plan with those different communities as to what their community needs are, so that we're responsive to the community needs and we police to help support the quality of life in those communities. Because what might be allowable in Stillwater Township, like driving a four-wheeler down a dirt road, may not be acceptable in Woodbury. Okay?
Yep, Paul, you kind of, you did mention some, but are there any other things that differentiate you from your opponent that would make you a better choice for us?
I completely believe in building inclusive communities. And some of the programs that we've already launched, one, for example, is our GTO program, which is our Growth Through Opportunity program. We're the first city police department in the nation outside of the state of Virginia to launch a program that reaches out to our disabled community and actually brings an individual into our police department and makes them for 16 weeks part of our organization. And what we're doing with this program is we put them in a uniform, similar to our reserves, our volunteers, they're called cadets. And for 16 weeks we work with the individuals with IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities. Because they're a big part of our inclusive community. When we talk about inclusive community, the disabled exist within our communities. And we want to find opportunities for them not only to participate with law enforcement, but we all want to help them be successful in our own communities. And so for 16 weeks, this program is designed that we help teach them real life skills, like how to fill out job applications, how to do mock interviews, introducing them to organizations and businesses within our communities to give them test job opportunities to see if there's different jobs that they may like. But at the same time, we're also showing those businesses that because you are disabled doesn't mean that you are incapable. And as an organization, what we're seeing is that our officers are learning what it's like to be disabled through personal experience and interaction working with these individuals on a daily basis. So that when we're out in the field and we need to deal with them in real life uncontrolled situations, that we're not misinterpreting the signals that these individuals put out as aggression. So that we make better decisions as law enforcement and we get better outcomes. You know, so that's one of the programs that we're doing there. So when I look at, you know, what this race really means in the future of Washington County, what we're really talking about is a broad idea individual that is an innovator, that's not only just challenging our organizations to move better forward and do better, but it's challenging an individual like myself that's challenging our profession to do better and how we police our communities. And an innovative individual who's looking to evolve the organization as our community evolves. And I think that's when I talk about that progress is impossible without change, and that we're really looking at voting for the future of Washington County. we have to be cognitive that it's going to require an experienced, educated innovator to be able to evolve the organization forward.
Any topic that I haven't covered, because we are running out of time, that you for sure want to convey your feelings on?
You know, one of the other initiatives that I have is about building a cybercrime unit. That we look at building a very robust cybercrime unit, because almost every crime we deal with nowadays has some sort of technology and cyber's fingerprint attached to it, whether it be using your cell phones or your computers. In the past, individuals would break into our homes, we'd have face-to-face confrontations, we knew who the suspects were, we saw them. Today, not quite so much. A lot of our suspects are cross-jurisdictional, meaning they're not even here in our community. They're not even in our state. Some of them don't even exist in our country. But yet they're using that technology against us to clean our bank accounts out through identity theft. They're using that technology against us to solicit our kids online. They're using that technology against us with phone and internet scams to steal our retirees' bank accounts and retirements. And until we in law enforcement really step it up and realize that this is part of the future of policing and solving crimes and combating crimes, is that our suspects are hiding behind the anonymity of a computer screen, cross-jurisdictional, and it's exceptionally important that we capture that digital evidence and that we start building those federal and state partnerships so that we can prosecute more effectively cross-jurisdictional. That's the future of where we're going in law enforcement and how we're going to combat crime. And it's a very important topic because we need to be better skilled at how we do that.
Tell the voters why they should vote for you.
I think I just...
Other reasons.
Margot, I think I just did.
I want a summary now, okay? We've done 40 minutes right now, okay?
All right.
But a summary. Lock it in. Key points.
Absolutely. I'm Paul Hoppe, and I'm running for Washington County Sheriff because I think the future of Washington County is going to require an innovative, experienced, progressive leader that's going to move the organization forward, that's going to get the employees working not as individuals, but as a group, focused on one vision, one mission, that's responsive to our community needs, led by an individual that's engaged in its community, that's listening to the residents of Washington County and what they need out of our organization to better protect our schools, our kids, and our neighborhoods.
See, that wasn't that hard, right? Condensing. Anyhow.
She's pretty good at that. I'm usually not that short.
Yeah, right. You warned me about that. Stillwater Gazette Managing Editor Alicia Labens has been writing up the responses, and they will appear on Friday, October 19th, Stillwater Gazette. What?
The week after, 26th.
Oh, October 26th. There's been a change already in my plans there. And in an upcoming issue of the Forest Lake Times, which I'm excited to have that because they're sisters, sister companies. Valley Access Channels will be replaying this session. Please contact them for the days and times. And we're also going to get a copy up to the Lakes Area Television, LATV, for replay. I will be interviewing Dan Starry on Monday, October 22nd. He was appointed as sheriff after former Sheriff Bill Hutton had resigned to take another position. I want to thank you for joining us at home and for joining us here. And thank you, Paul Hoppe.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate coming.